Everyone. Welcome to Political Fixer Live. I am your hostess with the mostest this evening, Shauna Presley Vircher, and we're so excited to have you joining us for this particular episode of Political Fixer Live. Welcome. I want to welcome all of you who are regulars, part of the Political Fixer family. And if you've never done a Political Fixer Live before, welcome to you as well. You've found the greatest community online. I'm telling you, here's how it's going to work. We're going to talk about some of the top stories. We're going to pick 3 stories that we consider to be the top stories we should be discussing right now in the news. Some of them are stories that are already being talked about, and candidly, some of them, most of the time, are stories we feel like aren't given enough coverage. And the great thing about landing in our political fixer family is that you get to participate in the conversation. We want to hear from you with your questions and comments, but also our political fixer family members are amazing. And so you'll find that long before I get to your questions and comments, that you'll have someone helpful encouraging you, giving you the information that you're looking for, and possibly your new best friend. You think I'm kidding, but this is a great group of people. So welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. We have, as usual, a lot to discuss. It was tough to figure out the theme this week. I got to tell you, I wanted to do something that was a little bit more impactful. There's a lot of nonsense that's happening politically. So, I guess if I have to pick a theme for tonight, because we definitely like to talk about the themes and stuff, I want to talk a little bit about how we have some control over things, how we actually have more control than we think over some future events, how we have the control and the ability to help, particularly each other during this difficult time, and also some control over the narrative. I think it's really important to keep trying to topple the king. Hello, hello to Square Foot Gardening for you. I see Kelly Frazier is on. I see so many others. We're already at over 1,000 likes. Listen, I don't know if you guys realize this, but we're still allowed to have elections in this country, it turns out. So, yay! So, we're going to be talking about some of them tonight, but make sure that you mark your calendars for next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we're going to be doing an election special on Political Fixer Live. There is a lot that's going to be happening. We're going to preview some of that now. So, mark your calendars next week for Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we want to make sure that you can join us no matter what your time zone is, no matter how late the World Series happens the night before. I don't know if any of you are sports fans, but holy moly, if you stayed up until 2:30 in the morning to watch that baseball game last night, I want to hear from you. All right, Sandy Soul is already getting us kicked off with some really important election information. Sandy, thank you for jumping the conversation right off right away. If you are in California, I want to let you know that Proposition 50 is on the ballot. Now, in case you're not familiar with that, that is the item that you, as California citizens, get to vote on to say whether or not California gets to redraw its congressional maps in response to primarily Texas gerrymandering their congressional maps. Now, this is a hotly contested issue, but I will give you some inside gossip on it. So let's start with the facts first. So 47 said he needed 5 more seats, had a resounding familiarity to it. Like, I only need a few thousand more votes, or whatever that quote was, but we're going to slide right past that. Said he needed to find a few congressional seats. Now, we talked about this a little bit on the show when it happened, but I just want to point out that this is not the cry from someone who is feeling especially strong in his position. If you are looking to cheat, then you are thinking you're going to lose. So 47 called for to Texas Governor Abbott and said, "Help me find these congressional seats," and Texas obliged. And so they started to railroad through some different legislation. And it was so bad that, as some of you might recall, some of the Democrats in the state legislature fled the state in order to try to avoid this legislation from getting passed. Now, hold on to that thought because we're going to circle back to it. In the meantime, Governor Gavin Newsom said, "Hey, listen, you can draw some pretty things. I can draw some pretty things. If you're going to redraw your congressional maps, we're going to redraw our congressional maps." And so the duel began. Now, the difference is in Texas, They railroaded it through with legislation. They locked out a lot of people that wanted to testify in the public hearings. This was not done with the will of the voters. On the other hand, in California, they are setting up to go to you, the voters. And this November, in just a week, is when you get to vote on Proposition 50, right? So, square foot gardening pointing out this is the right way to do it. So, this is really important because for some people, the idea of anything that might change the vote or taint it or redraw these maps, it's sacrosanct, right? But at the same time, some people are like, we have to fight fire with fire. And these are the discussion points that are being held, not just in California, but now other states are jumping into the fray, some of them voluntarily. Indiana is saying we might redraw our congressional maps. New York had already redrawn their congressional maps. Now they're being sued to possibly have to redraw them. This is a conversation that is just getting started. It is far from over. But California, we're going to start off the night right now by mentioning your election regarding the drawing of the California seats. Okay, I also want to say hi to Kathy. I see you on. I see J Robot is on. Let's talk about another race that's happening next week. New Jersey, going to the opposite coast here. New Jersey has a very important governor's race happening. Governor Phil Murphy, who I helped to elect, it has been termed out. He can no longer run again, so it is essentially an open seat. So right now you have Jack Ciattarelli, who is a Republican running, versus Mikey Sherrill. She is a Democrat who's a current congresswoman who is running on the Democratic side. The polls are all over the board. Some of them have her leading by double digits. Some of them are razor thin. We actually just did a video earlier talking about how the markets disagree with the polls because I think it's 90% of the market or 84% of the market say that the Democrat will win, but it's too close for comfort in New Jersey right now for some. Now, if you're wondering, this isn't just a wear your blue jersey and call it a day. I think we're all learning very quickly as some of these very interesting candidates emerge that we cannot safely say the words vote blue no matter who. There are some very interesting characters that we absolutely should not be supporting. But in this case, it's not always like who's great that's running, but also what are we running against? So if you're not familiar with Jack C., the Republican running, I want to tell you that he has said some pretty inflammatory things. But to give you an indication, 47 endorsed him on True Social saying this: Jack, the Republican candidate, has gone all in and is now 100% plus exclamation point MAGA, right? So this guy is going to vote the way that people think he's going to vote. Why should this matter in New Jersey? You're now running to be governor, not to be a congressperson. Because what's happening at the governor's races is vitally important in how they handle ICE coming into their state. What are they going to do with children and vaccines? What is going to happen with the funding of education in the state? How are they going to handle their own maps and drawing of congressional seats? No matter what, these races, I would argue they have always been important, but they are particularly important now. And so, right now, the policy is basically being issued from the top, which in MAGA's case is 47. And so it's really important to see who's running and to vote if you're in any of these locations where you have an opportunity to do so. Um, if you're curious, Jack C is just the lovable guy that you would think that he is as 100% plus MAGA. He has opposed same sex marriage. He said some extremely racist things about some of his own voters. And he also wanted to reassure everyone that he doesn't take any money from Jews. Oh, okay. Wow. So this is what we're talking about versus, the veteran who has served in Congress, et cetera. So New Jersey, make your own decisions, but I wouldn't take any of this lightly. And I know this is a time of year that everybody gets flooded, just flooded with political ads. And the great thing about political ads is they don't have to be true. So just stop, research, see some of the things this guy has said with his own face, and then ask yourself who you should vote for and make sure that you do vote. Hello to Chocolate Sunshine, or is it Cocoa Latte Sunshine? That's awesome. Hi to Cocoa Latte. Hi to so many other of our Political Fixer family members already at 9,000 likes. We're doing a quick review here on Political Fixer Live of some of the top races in the country. And there's one theme, one bit of homework for all of you here, and I bet you can guess what it is. I want you to look up what races are in your area. If you have any, not all of us have races we can vote on. What are the races in your area for next Tuesday? And make sure that you vote. Vote early if you can. And I just want to point out that this is just the start of election season, but it's an important start. So, we're doing a quick rundown of some of the top things that are on the ballot, but mark your calendars for next Tuesday, where we do an election special and talk about the races as they come in, right? All right. So, we have New Jersey's governor's race. We also have Virginia's governor's race. Believe it or not, Virginia has a high ranking. The polling is surprising. Let's just say it's surprising. Two women, no matter what, Virginia will have a woman as governor next. You have Winsome Earl Sears, the Republican, and you have Democrat Abigail Spanberger, who was a congresswoman. I think she's technically still sitting in Congress. I don't think that she resigned to run. Now, Virginia is interesting because it is seen as very purple. We had, a two-term governor who was extremely conservative, who was dragging the country more into that MAGA conservatism. He has termed out. So this is a fully open seat. And now you have a very interesting dynamic with two women running for governor in what's still considered by many to be a southern state. I know it's not technically southern, but it is, right? I mean, in some of the ways and manners of Virginia, if you've ever spent any time there, there are parts of it that are still deeply rooted in those traditional Southern values. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. Right now, the Democrat, Abigail Spanberger, is receiving a 7 to 10 point swing. Right now in polls, she is leading. If you look at the markets, she's leading even further. She's in the 90% percentile of how many bettors and markets think that she will win. None of it matters if you don't vote. Um, I find this to be very interesting because this could have been a really great policy driven opportunity for two women to run for higher office. And instead, we've got some really hateful rhetoric that's coming out it's not even anti the other candidate, it's anti women. In fact, Winsome Earl Sears has said, and I want to get this quote correct, that abortion is, quote, genocide, and says that consenting to sex is consenting to pregnancy. So, yeah. So if you are inclined to travel in your time machine and vote for her, that option is available to you. But no matter what, Virginia, make sure you raise your voices and vote for whomever you back on the ballot. Um, it's really interesting because this is the only currently Republican held governorship that is up for reelection right now. So in New Jersey, it's already a Democrat, and we're looking to see if another Democrat replaces him, if Mikey Shell replaces Phil Murphy. But in Virginia, this is a Republican seat. Will Republicans lose a seat? That is going to be a bellwether moment that we're all looking for. Hello to Carrie. Tap, tap, tap to you. I see you here. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, let's look at a congressional race that is also happening next Tuesday. Now, in full disclosure, I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago and I told you it was a possibility. But those of you that watched Political Fixer Live before, I said if we got pulled into this race, I would disclose. So I want to tell you that we are actively helping to elect Jolanda Jones, who is on the ballot for the special election for the congressional special election in Texas 18. This is a congressional election that's running now because Sylvester Turner passed away. And so they needed to fill the seat after his passing. Now, a lot of people think Texas and they think Southern and red state, but this is actually in the Houston area. A lot of my folks live in this area. I was born and raised one county south of this in Galveston County, very familiar with Harris County, which is where Houston is. This is a very blue area. This is a very diverse area. And there are a lot of talented people on the ballot. In fact, 16 candidates qualified for the ballot. So there is absolutely no excuse, Texas, for not voting. If you are in District 18, if you live in the Houston area, find out if you are able to vote in this race because you want to make sure that you pick your favorite candidate here. Really important. Again, a lot of great candidates, right? We have endorsed Jolanda Jones, But this is a case of having a lot of amazing people running. There is nothing wrong with many of the other candidates running. I just like her. I think she's a very strong personality. If you start, you guys actually can go to our website if you want and look at stuff. We put together a site called Lone Star Vote. That's again lonestarvote.com. LoneStarVote.com tells you where you can vote, whether you're voting early or you're voting on the day of. It has an interactive map. It tells you something about the race and it tells you something about Miss Jones, including the fact that, remember how I talked earlier, just a little while, just rewind, rewind, rewind. We talked earlier about Texas standing up to Governor Abbott and this gerrymandering situation with the congressional districts. If she looks familiar to you, it's because Jolanda Jones is currently a state representative who was standing up to Governor Abbott extremely vocally on many news channels against this gerrymandering and helping to lead the effort of Democrats safely leaving the state to try to avoid that passing. She might also look familiar to you because she was on Survivor. So just letting you know that. So you're like, I think I saw her somewhere. That is also where she might look familiar to you. But as someone who grew up in that area, whose high school played the University of Houston fight song, which is what she where she went to school for both undergrad and her law degree, we are backing Miss Jones. But no matter who you are backing, Houston area folks, and if you're in Texas, call your Houston area folks. Special elections tend to have very low turnout. Every vote matters. So no matter who they are supporting, make sure your Houston people are getting to the polls. Early voting has already started, and then the election is next Tuesday. And it's going to be great to see who represents Houston now. That is a city with rich tradition and traditionally very strong voices at the table. Okay, let's talk about a race that is happening that you, many of you, I'm sure, know it by now. We will finally have an answer to who is going to become the next mayor of New York City. And if you have not been following this race, how? Literally, how? Because I feel like almost every other news program, every other TikTok video I see is about either Cuomo or Mamdani. But we will finally find out who emerges victorious in New York City. So let's talk a little bit about this one for a second, because if you're in New York, vote, 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 vote. You may have already voted and you're like, didn't I just do that? No, no, this is the general election. You're like, yeah, but it was Cuomo Mamdani. It was, it's a long story. But here's the thing. You have a situation where there are, there's an opportunity to send a message. And it's interesting how people believe this message is going to be received. Is this a question of centrist policies like Cuomo versus progressive and what Mamdani himself calls socialist policies? Is it a question of a younger, newer Democrat with Mamdani and a more established brand of Democrat whose father was a governor before him, the former governor Andrew Cuomo? Is it a question of the guy who actually seems like a nice guy who has, an awesome mom and from all accounts an awesome wife versus the guy who's been accused of being a sexual predator by 11 women in Cuomo, right? So that should possibly weigh in somewhere. Is it a question of, is New York ready for its first Muslim mayor? Or is it going to be what allies of Cuomo have said, where he should apologize for 9/11, the awful event that happened when he was 9 years old? There's a lot of different emotions that are playing out right now. So, question to any of you: have you been following the New York City mayor's race? Are any of you actually in New York City? Because I'm not, and I've been covering this thing for what feels like a year. Ever since there was about 45 candidates on stage, we've been covering this race because it is so compelling to me, because you've got Democrats versus Democrats. And I look at this as, what is the new shape of the Democratic Party going to be? Right? What are we looking at as far as where our party goes? Is it more establishment? My dad was a governor, connections. We look the other way with scandals and we protect our own, very centrist, very, we don't say any ideas that are too bold because we don't know if we can deliver on them. Or is it, listen, we can do better and we might not achieve on everything, but let's aim for the good stuff. Let's aim for affordable housing and groceries that include vegetables for people and affordable daycare. Is it wrong to promise things if the system might beat you down and you might not get it all, right? So I see Stephanie saying there's so much to follow these days. Stephanie, that's an evergreen post, and that says that I do plan to catch up on that race. You absolutely should. I find it to be very inspiring. One of the things that I find inspiring, regardless of which candidate you're backing, is the turnout is insanely high, and that's what you want, right? I see Jamil. Mamdani won all debates, no question. Jamil, I watched a healthy no, I probably watched an unhealthy amount of those debates. We were hired to cover some of those debates and the race in general. And I got to tell you, here's a lesson that I take away. If you're not familiar with Mamdani, and he's, I think, an interesting story, but if you're not familiar with Mamdani, one of his little bullet points in his past is he's really into hip hop, and buried somewhere on Instagram are videos of him doing some rap battles and rap tracks. All right. As a general rule, I think as a society, we should agree, do not debate a guy who raps as part of his history, as part of his skill set, because the clapbacks from Mamdani were impressive. This guy literally did not miss a beat. I see 135 Masani saying, I'm a New York City boomer who voted for Mamdani. So fun. That's so fun. I love that. I see Stephanie saying, looking forward to watching this. We're going to cover this and many other races next week on our election special on Political Fixer Live, right here on TikTok, on YouTube, on Substack. 9 p.m. Eastern is when it's going to start, right? Um, Jamil bringing up a good point. He connects with Gen Z also. Absolutely, a valid point. We're seeing such a surge in youth voting. I think that his messaging on social media, if you watch Survivor, he had a Survivor commercial. If you watch Bachelor, he had a Bachelor themed commercial. This is a guy who understands the art of the show. His mom is a filmmaker, his dad is a professor. So there's no shortage of trying to compel people to pay attention to their art or their professional capabilities there. And I think he must have inherited much of that as well. I'm seeing a lot of people that are becoming new members of the Political Fixer fan club. Thank you so much for your support. When you like and share this show, it means so much to us. We have a lot to cover tonight. And if you'll forgive me, I'm actually going to take off my jacket because we're getting really into this subject matter. And as we do, the temperature here is getting hot. Is it the topics or is it just me? Just kidding. Okay. If you like, not so subtle segue, if you like the shirt that I'm wearing, I want to give a shout out to the artist who designed it, Miss Asia, AJA. You can find her on Etsy at Coming and Going Designs. I don't get paid for this plug. I just want to let you know I found her on Blue Sky doing her own version of clapping back and just fighting the good fight, making people be held accountable for the things that they're saying, and making sure that language, as we try to do here, stays constructive. That it's like, okay, you might have complaints about someone in office. What are you going to do about it? You might think that a certain policy is imperfect. What are you going to do to be part of the positive change? So I started following her because of that on Blue Sky. And again, it's spelled AJA. I believe her handle is Miss MISSAJA. And then I started seeing her art. And then when I saw my Antifa shirt here, if you can see it without the microphone here, I had to have it right away. Had her drop ship it to me so that it could be ready for this show. So, all that to say, support your local artists, support women, support those that have a side hustle right now. Oh my gosh, we're going to talk more about that later, but do what you can to support them. And David Kramer, going back to Mamdani, says, I like him, but he may have promised more than he can deliver. I agree, David, that, I don't know the inner workings of New York City's town hall. I don't, their city council, how it works. And I think that all of these goals are something that I truly think he wants to achieve. So this is a fundamental question. Would you rather have a politician, a political figure that might not be able to deliver on every promise, but sincerely is painting a vision of where they want to take things that they're going to try? Or would you rather have someone that's like, listen, you can't say all of that. We can't deliver on that, and talk more about the status quo and try to preserve and kind of get those marginal increases? I think that's a really important question that we're facing as a party, because right now, with what's happening with 47, and we're going to talk more about that in just a bit, we've got some hot gossip there. with what's happening with 47, there's this tendency for many of us to feel like we need to be the adults in the room. But to outsiders looking in, does that appear that we're nothing more than the wet blankets? Are we taking on the mom role, so to speak, where we're always wagging our finger and saying, you can't do that? Who are our sweeping visionaries? Who are the ones that are casting the dreams for the future rather than just saying what's wrong with what's happening now? Right? So I think this is part of the soul of the party that we're talking about. We do need to be responsible right now. We do need to be the stewards of the practical and the legal. But can we also paint a sweeping vision for the future? I think that's what we're all wrestling with the party. But what do you think, right? I like here what first of all, pumpernickel crouton. Love that. How did you do you type in pumpernickel like 55 times? That's crazy to me. Anyway, if you don't have lofty ideals, you don't have a direction. I love the idea of having a mission statement in this country again that is beyond stop 47. And I do think that cost us in the 2024 election. I'm not saying that's not important. Let me be very, very clear. Stopping 47 and what's happening, super important. But where was our big vision? Where was that future? Right. And, not criticizing at all. It's so easy to Monday morning quarterback. But right now, I want to look at what do I want to see in our leaders in the future, and I definitely think we need to have our own sweeping vision. We need to have that this is our playbook. We might pass some of it, we might fail, but at least we're going to try, right? Okay. So, I want to talk more. All right, we've talked about the election stuff. I really feel like this is the beginning of the topics we're going to talk about. One other quick note I want to make on this. On the 2 shows ago, I talked to you about how Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida um, had refused to call the special election of a seat that was vacant. The seat was vacant because he appointed the guy who was in that state Senate seat to be his new lieutenant governor. And so the ACLU sued DeSantis and said, listen, you can't just have a vacant seat forever and ever. You have to have a vote in our legislature. These people deserve representation. This happens to be in my community. It's not my seat. I'm just over the line, but it's my community. Well, we have some news for you on that. Just this week, actually Friday afternoon, the governor, after being sued and pressured from within, if rumors hold true, he called the special election in that race. So, we're going to be talking more about that because I don't think it would surprise many of you to learn if you watch this program at all that we're going to be getting involved. That special election is going to be in March, and we're going to find ways that all of you can get involved. And the reason that I think you should is because of a couple of things. Number one, it's always fun to, proverbially, not literally, punch DeSantis in the nose. And this seat is very important to him and it is absolutely flippable. So that's fun. But on a more serious note, this is a situation where you're talking about an election that's going to happen in March when not a lot of other elections are happening of that caliber. It's going to get a lot of coverage. So I believe this could be a really good tone setter for the midterms coming up several months later with Congress. I think if we win something like this, it sends a strong message that we can do this of positivity and unity. So, the candidate that I'll be backing is Brian Nathan. It's Brian for FL.com. .com. FL is for Florida, Brian for FL.com. I'll be filling all of you in on how you can get involved in this and other races. But next week, we're going to be talking about the races that are happening then and doing on the air live election reveals as far as the results and talking about them as a family. So definitely join us with that. Okay. As we move forward on this lovely political fixer live, we are already at over 30,000 likes. You guys are too good to me. That's amazing. I want to talk about something that is a pretty serious topic. I just had dinner with a good friend who said that she struggles because as she tries to follow the news and tries to follow politics, that it's hard to tell what is real and what is fake, what is true and what is noise, what's someone being honest about what's happening and what's someone with an agenda. And I think that's such an important point that a lot of people face. And that's why so many people tune out elections. They don't feel like they know that they can trust what's happening right now. This is definitely the case when we're talking about our next subject, which is 47 does not seem like he is doing well. And I say that in all seriousness, not in a snipey way, but I want to give you some developments that are coming across right now and tell you that this does not strike me as someone who is all there. And again, not saying this in a sniping way. And this is going to be a tough conversation for us to have as a family, as Americans, because we just got fed all of this stuff about Biden and Biden and Biden. Oh, he's having these senior moments and all of these other things. Are people going to believe what's being fed to them? Are they going to look objectively at what's happening with the diehard loyalty that is MAGA from the top down, vice president on down? Is anyone going to step in if things get worse? Let me tell you what I'm referring to. All right. There was an interesting quote that 47 said on Air Force One. This happened just yesterday, actually. I'm going to read this quote to you. He said, "They have Jasmine Crockett, a low IQ person. AOC is also low IQ. You give her an IQ test, have her pass like the exams that I decided to take when I was at Walter Reed. Let AOC go against Trump. Let Jasmine go against Trump." That's 47 saying this. Now, he went on to say that some of those questions are tough. At first, it starts out easy, like elephant, giraffe, lion, but it gets tougher. He also said that he chose to take an MRI when he was there. Now, an annual exam for a president, any president, is standard. They do this all the time. It doesn't matter how young or old you are, it is part of the health of the nation. We need to know if a president has a physical or mental impairment so we know if they are fit and able to serve, right? Um, there's been some speculation on this for quite some time, but this is the most clear information that we've had in a beat because there's some pieces that were revealed. Number 1, the Walter Reed visit didn't happen on his annual exam. It happened at the 6-month mark, which is a common mark when you are trying to mark some sort of mental decline. Also, he is describing a test, and I want to get this correct. This is not something that I am an expert in, so I did a lot of research to try to look at this. But this cognitive test that he's talking about that he has taken is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. I think it's MOCA, MOCA. I don't know how it's pronounced with its abbreviation, but the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test, right? It is not an IQ test. This isn't about how smart you are. This is about things like they will ask you, can you name animals you might find in the jungle? Elephant, giraffe, lion. If I give you 4 words, can you remember them in order? Man, woman, person, camera. See where I'm going with this? So the test for someone that is not in cognitive decline, it's you repeat, you recite, what is the day, what do you remember, name 5 animals, you're good to go. But for someone who is in mental decline, then they start to show different disabilities in answering those questions. They stumble, they get confused, they get frustrated, some of them get agitated. And when that happens, they look for more answers, namely they order an MRI. And that is apparently what has happened. Now, you might think, oh, this is conspiracy theory, or they said this about Biden, or what have you. Let me tell you something. There's a lot happening with mainstream media, but I'm going to read just a couple of passages from a news story. It says that he confused dementia screenings for, quote, very hard IQ test and bragged about the results. It says that he appeared to boast about results of a dementia screening test. He claims to have taken an IQ test when actually it was a cognitive exam. Um, it says, let's see, he's referring to the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. It is a 10-minute assessment designed to identify signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. That there is a memo that said that he had already undergone an exam in April for his physical exam, and yet he's back again. That he was also allegedly given this test in 2018, which brought on that person, woman, man, camera, TV comment, right? Now, I'm going through these short comments from a story. I want to show you, if I can, where this story is coming from. This isn't MSNBC. This isn't a far leftist blog. People Magazine. People Magazine. This is far from a leftist publication. This is now mainstreamed, as they say. This is now a concern that people have and is becoming a talking point. Um, I don't know if any of you saw the clip of him I think he was in Japan. I've watched a lot of news over the last couple of days and slept for very little of it. But there is a clip of him being guided down a hallway. It's about 30 seconds. There's military off to his left. On you, it would be like on the camera, it would be to the right. He salutes military that's not ours. He wanders. He looks at a band, the brass band that's at the end of the hallway for a few seconds. He wanders. A woman comes and gently brings him back. And then she brings him all the way back down to the podium that he walked right past. He's just stumbling. He's not looking great. Right? So Sandy Soul saw this, says he looks totally lost and unstable. So, okay, why bring this up? Right? I understand this is such just a really sensitive topic, right? If he is not cognitively at 100%, who is running things? That's first question. I think we know some of those answers. I think Stephen Miller is definitely among them. I think we're seeing different members, former members of the Heritage Foundation that are flexing their might, right? Um, what is being done that's manipulating his responses to things? If he can post something on social and tariffs go up by 10 points because he didn't like an ad he saw, if he can send troops with a post to because someone showed him a video that wasn't true of broken windows and abandoned buildings in Portland, which again wasn't real, right? Then what could happen? In a normal presidency, this is bad. But in a presidency that is governed by social post, where a manic outburst defines policy with zero checks and balances, Congress has basically checked out of the situation. The Supreme Court says he can't be prosecuted, right? With all of these things, then one tweet does what? Right? One post on Truth Social could send us into war with someone. So my question is this: are you concerned? Or are you like, you know what? He's been going downhill for a while. This is just, we kind of knew what we were getting. Do you think that anyone will step in and say, whoa, 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 this has gone far enough, right? April Kelly says, I am so depressed over this nightmare. I'm hoping depression is not where we land. I'm hoping that there's a couple of things, right? A manic outbursts, according to Stephanie, 100%. Yes. Very concerned, square foot gardening. Jamil brings a great point. Like, yes, and knew this was coming. Fair point. I don't think it's a shocker. I guess I'm just shocked at how much we know. And if we already know this much, how bad is it really? Right? Nini says, very concerned. Same thing by Kathy McGrath Walcott, right? Concerned with exclamation points. Hold on. It's happening so fast. I'm scrolling to Janie, right? So Veronica Kennard brings up a good point. They cover up everything. I doubt that they'll do anything. Kind of my point. They do cover up a lot, right? And administrations by nature tend to be secretive and protective. But this one, we could argue a bit more so, but yet we know all of this. We know all of these things. So let's try to put a positive spin on all of this because we don't like to stay down. I hear you on the point of being depressed. Here's the thing. He's not as almighty and powerful as he likes to project. And I think when you have this image of someone who is ailing health-wise, whether we don't know how fast, we don't know how bad it is, what have you, but there's clearly something happening. We've seen photos of the IVs, the scars from IVs that he's been administered. One of you mentioned his leaning, one of you mentioned his gait, right? We've seen some stuff for a while. He is not almighty and powerful. And so therefore, submission and compliance in advance should absolutely not be happening. Don't get me wrong. I'm not wishing physical ill on someone. I'm saying this idea like, oh, we can't go against him because he might do something. Right. We need to smash this facade of him being almighty and powerful Oz. That has to happen right away. That curtain has to be pulled back. I think it's really beneficial to have the conversation about how this is temporary. And honestly, no matter what, he could be in perfect health, but mortality is mortality. When we're having these conversations with Congress, at some point they will not have him to hide behind. One more point of gossip on this that I saw a clip on, and then we'll get to our next story. Um, Interesting thing happened with Mike Johnson, America's favorite evil Keebler elf, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, where he was asked about a third term, about 47 serving a third term, and he was very quick to dismiss it. And you might say to yourself, well, yeah, it's insane and it's not in the Constitution. And why was someone even asking about that? All of those facts are true, but usually MAGA toes the line. And this is the first time, including J.D. Vance, who is theoretically next in line in secession, right? Even J.D. Vance is refusing to speak out against the idea of him not serving a third term. Mike Johnson is the first time I've seen someone MAGA say, no, 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 we're not having that. Are they finally snapping out of the fog? Republicans are known for being so good at strategy before this. They would have their who's going to serve next, and then right behind them, and who is going to have a shot at Speaker of the House versus who's going to be someone's vice president. They would have these conversations 20 years in advance. And now they're just saying this guy can hold on to the crown for another 4 years. Very unRepublican of them, very MAGA of them, but very non Republican of them, right? So it's Professor Liberty Esquire brings up a good point. Maybe Johnson's doing it to downplay so we just don't worry before the midterms. Highly possible. Highly possible. April Kelly saying that the GOP has never governed well. Not arguing that they governed well, but that they did politics well. That they politicked well, right? I think that there's some brilliance. It might be considered evil brilliance, depending on what your side of the aisle is or what your values are. But when you look at Karl Rove, when you look at the Reagan years, when you look at some of the messaging that happened, it was genius. Might be considered evil genius. They were loyal. They had a hierarchy. It was disciplined. None of that exists anymore, right? I see Guava Girl bringing up Steve Bannon, very determined. Yes, absolutely. um, so it's just, people are saying if he can do it, they will try. I guess I'm just surprised that you would allow people to stay at the top because there's also sort of a king of the hill mentality in politics. We saw this so much, like how quickly did the knives sharpen? Biden was amazing until there might be an opening, and then Biden was not, right? Kamala Harris was amazing when it looked like she might be president, and then Kamala Harris was awful, right? There is this natural, inherent knives out mentality in politics if you feel like you can go up a spot, right? And so I'm just very interested that that's not happening here, that you don't have one faction of the Republican Party that is exploiting this so that they can get their own person in there at the top of the ticket. Maybe I'm the only political nerd that's fascinated by this, but I got to tell you, objectively, I find the whole thing scary. But if you're talking about gamesmanship and political strategy, which we try to look at that sometimes here on Political Fixer Live, baffling to me. Baffling. Just goes against every political instinct I've ever seen from Republicans to support this idea of a third term. All right, we are already at over 45,000 likes, and we stumbled upon a different story. I love the butterfly, so pretty. We stumbled upon a different kind of story this week than I was expecting. I wanted to look at something that I felt like wasn't getting enough news coverage or maybe wasn't getting the correct news coverage. And I wanted to provide some context. So easily we just kind of dig in and we're used to hearing different phrases. Um, Before I move on, I want to go to some of our YouTube listeners really fast. I see Kelly saying if they're giving him the Montreal cognitive test, they have concerns for dementia. My spouse had dementia. I'm sorry, Kelly. I don't think I realized that. And I see many characteristics in 47. I think all of this is going on behind the scenes, and it doesn't help when Bannon is telling us we will have to get used to it because, 47 is just going to get a third term. Yeah, I've had family members in cognitive decline as well. Um, it is tough to watch, and it's, I think, somehow made tougher by the fact that we fear what could happen as a result. But also, I got to tell you, even with him, it's hard watching the idea that he's just about to be exploited or used as like this like puppet while they get what they want. Like, I don't know. It's just, it's very odd and disconcerting. And so my sympathies sincerely to anyone who's had family members that have suffered from dementia or some form of Alzheimer's or some sort of similar memory loss, cognitive failure disease. There's, in my opinion, very little that's more brutal. All right. This is not exactly a cheery topic that we're pivoting to, but I promise you that there will be things that we can do at the end of this. You're going to end up with a second bit of homework. We started the hour talking about the elections, and your homework assignment was very clear, which is find out if there are elections happening near you, particularly this next Tuesday, and make sure you vote. There are a lot more special elections, ballot initiatives, local races that you might not realize are important. You've got some federal races happening. There's a lot more happening than people realize. We are going to have an election special next week, but that's going to be too late for you to vote. So I use Bolts Magazine, which is free. You can contribute to them. Not paid to say that, but just want to let you know that is a great resource for me. Bolts, as in lightning bolts, Bolts. And so I just look for Bolts Magazine in Google and go to them, and they have a really good election roundup. One thing I like about Bolts is they not only tell you what's happening, but from a social justice perspective, they tell you why you should care. They give you context, and that's very helpful if you're someone that cannot keep up with every story. And none of us can keep up with every story right now, right? Um, okay. So I want to go back to some conversation that we're hearing, some chatter that we're hearing about what's happening with the economy right now. Like, are we in for another great recession? Are we in for another great depression? And I want to give some context to a couple of things that happened during the Great Depression. And it's directly important with something that's happening right now. And more to the point, I'm going to throw in some context here on what we think about and what we've been trained on. We were talking about messaging, what we've been trained to think about some of the things that were happening right now. So in 1933, when we're talking about the Great Depression, we're talking about, almost 100 years ago, not quite, that unemployment was 25%, the highest it had ever been. So you're saying that one in four people seeking work could not find it. And so keep in mind, this is 1933. So there was not a lot of dual income households then, right? It was very traditional for many people that the man worked and the woman stayed home and watched the children and kept house, right? So if this man did not have income, that meant the entire family had no income. And for perspective, one in four people not having a job, that was the average. In some cities, and I'm going to give you some numbers here. In Toledo, Ohio, it was 80% unemployment. In Cleveland, it was 50%. In Detroit, it was 50%. Half of the people looking for work could not find it. And so what happened is people didn't have food. It wasn't just, oh, we have to tighten our belts and lean into our savings. This was a period where people literally could not eat. Now, people were trying to rely on the support systems available. There were millions of people that started going into the churches, there were charities, there were public bread lines to try to get food. And in 1932, the state of New York said that through their emergency programs alone, they were feeding 100,000 people a day. And again, this was back in 1933. The Red Cross was providing flours and beans. I'm sorry, not flowers, flour, the food, and beans to people in the South to try to avoid starvation. Children were the ones that were suffering the most. They were showing up malnourished, children were passing away. There were emergency meal programs at the schools. This was a crisis. Now, on the other side of things, farmers who grow food were experiencing a unique type of crisis on their own. As hard as it is to believe, some farmers had too much food because the cost of raising that food, especially when you're talking about milk or having pigs, because you have to feed the animals before you can sell them or sell what they're creating, that was so high compared to how low the cost of food was that it was cheaper for them to just burn the crops or get rid of the animals than it was for them to try to actually get that food and get it to Americans. So you had starving Americans on one side, and then you had farmers that were losing everything and literally having to destroy their own crops because they couldn't afford to keep them. So a solution was generated to help both the farmers and to help the people that were starving. Then there was this program where you could go in and you could purchase stamps. So you could hand a grocery store or your local, general store, you could hand them $5 and they would give you a booklet of stamps. And those stamps could be used for anything in the store. But then you got bonus stamps. And those stamps could only be used for the things that farmers were having trouble getting rid of. They needed the money for things like milk and cheeses and pork and eggs and things like that, right? So it helped the farmers not destroy the crops, and then it helped people not starve. So it was kind of like a buy one get one free. These stamps that I think were orange, they you could use them on anything. But these stamps over here could only be used on the surplus farm items, and the government helped pay for that. And those were called food stamps. Literally, they were food stamps. It was the earliest version of that we had in our American history. So at that point in time, this was a huge social safety net for millions of people who were literally starving. Now, fast forward, you get to the situation in the 1960s, the 1970s, civil rights is starting to happen. You've got urban populations that are starting to get more attention. You've got more of the civil rights movement and the feminist movement happening. And instead of this being a program that helps people, as it took different shapes, it was no longer stamps, it was different ways of administering this program. But this idea of welfare started to develop a stigma, right? And it started to have some not so subtle racist overtones to it. And then you get to 1976, and a young man, a former actor and then governor of California, Ronald Reagan, decides that he's going to run for president. And he senses this kind of anti welfare sentiment. So on his campaign trail, he comes up with, or rather, he coins the phrase, I'm sure someone else came up with it, welfare queen. This idea of moral judgment that if you're receiving help from the government, there must be something wrong with you. In fact, he went further. He told the story of a woman in Chicago. And according to him, this is a quote from his stump speech in 76. He says, "There is a woman who has 80 names, 30 addresses, 15 phone numbers, and she collects veterans benefits on four non existent deceased husbands. She's living in a huge house in the suburbs. Her tax-free cash income has been running about $50,000 a year, $150,000 a year." Now, this woman did exist. Her name was Linda Taylor. She did commit fraud, but it was nowhere near the level of what he was saying, and more to the point, fraud in and of itself of these types of programs was not nearly as prevalent as what Reagan was saying, but it was really popular. It was a really good us versus them. We work for a living, they're looking for handouts. We look this way and we don't need anything from our government. We'll pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. Those welfare queens over there, there's something wrong with them. They're taking advantage of you. It was highly effective and he was elected. He also said something interesting, and to stop me if this sounds familiar to some of what we're hearing right now, he said, "It's not that we don't spend enough, we just spend it badly. We're just inefficient, and we're going to cut out some of the system inefficiencies with these programs." Now, if you guys think that I am being unfair to Reagan, that is a good point. I do not care for many of Reagan's policies, so I'm going to give you one here. We talked about a Republican, let's talk about a Democrat. Bill Clinton did not help with these policies when he was in office. The so called poor boy from Hope, Arkansas, actually read the room and realized that this was a weakness of his. He could not be seen siding with the poors. No, absolutely not. He needed to come out heavily, or so he thought in his own political mind. And so he made welfare reform one of his top platforms. He bought in to a lot of these Reagan policies. And so it was a Democrat in the 90s who made this even more difficult for people to receive the care that they needed. He leaned into some of the myths of who was receiving welfare benefits. And at the time, 60% of Americans believed that people who were receiving these government benefits were lazy, right? And we're going to talk more about the reality of that in a second. So in 1996, Bill Clinton signed the PRWORA, doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but it stands for the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act. So it said that there was a 5-year lifetime limit on getting these benefits. It had strict work requirements. It allowed states to cut people off somewhat arbitrarily. It reduced aid significantly, and it didn't just cut the programs, it cut access to the programs. And as a result, did he save money? Was he the big hero of the South? Quite the opposite. While the people receiving benefits dropped by 50%, half of them gone, it just means they didn't get help. So poverty, and I mean extreme poverty, under $2 a day poverty tripled, particularly for single mothers. Black children became twice as likely as white children because guess what? These programs were cut like that in the South, where there was already an income disparity. And states like Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama, they aggressively cut these families off from aid. Fast forward, President Obama is in the White House. And against what I think are really long shot political odds, especially as our first Black president, he takes on welfare reform in a different way. He doesn't talk about it as welfare. He rebranded it to SNAP, a supplemental nutrition assistance program. So instead of food stamps and welfare, he calls it SNAP. Instead of somebody having to stand in line and get something, we had debit cards that they could just use like any other debit card. It has limitations. There's only certain things that people that use a SNAP card can buy, but it let them do things with dignity rather than having the indignity on top of the potential starvation. He did link SNAP to work support, but not dependency, and he tied it to job preservation. He said that this isn't just something that benefits them, it benefits the grocers that they spend the money on, it benefits the farmers. He tied it to economic prosperity for everyone, not as some sort of charity case for people who were down on their luck and needed assistance. And several times he went to the mat during budget fights, similar to the budget fights we're having right now, and tried to protect SNAP from cuts or from being taken from these families. Fast forward to where we are now. On November 1st, SNAP benefits will expire, not be available for over 40 million Americans. Now, I want to tell you more about who these people are. I wanted to tell you first about this program and its roots. And the bottom line is there's a key point that I left out in this narrative, which is as after World War II, we were doing better economically. And so that program of food stamps started to fall by the wayside. But it was President Kennedy who stepped in the 60s and said, you know what? I don't care if this program is smaller than it was. There is no excuse in the wealthiest nation in the world for children to be starving inside of its walls. And so, therefore, President Kennedy picked back up the program, not with the poverty is overwhelming us angle, but there shouldn't be any child that starves in our country. And that's really the conversation that we're having kind of right now. Is it okay for children to starve? All right. Let me give you some actual real data here. Around 40, almost 42 million people receive SNAP benefits. Numbers are vague. We talk about that a lot on this show. Let me tell you what that means. That means that about 1 in every 8 humans in the United States receives some sort of SNAP benefits. If you do it by households that are impacted, it's 1 out of 6. 1 out of every 6 of your neighbors, no matter where you are in the country, it is usually at least 1 out of every 6 are benefiting from some sort of SNAP benefits. Specifically, let's talk about some myths. All right. Children are 40% of this program. These benefits are addressed to them. Their parents use it to feed them. And yeah, presumably, maybe other members of the family. Gasp. 40% of SNAP benefits go to children. If you calculate children, seniors, or someone with a disability who cannot work, it is 73%, almost 3 out of 4 people. These are not people that can pull themselves up by the bootstraps and go grab a hard hat and get to work. They're just not. 3 out of every 4, 73% of these people that are receiving these benefits are either children, the elderly, or someone with a severe disability. There are able-bodied adults who sometimes receive SNAP. Most of them, it's because they are caring for someone with a disability or something similar in their household, and so what they're making is not enough. There is something known as the working poor in this country, another inexcusable sin, in my opinion, but it exists. So, this idea that everyone who receives SNAP doesn't work, just not true. It's absolutely not true. Um, 79% of these households are blended households. There are very few that are just women having babies. That is just a gross myth. However, if you want to talk about the households that are the hardest hit when these cuts happen, it is single mothers with children because they have no other person to help them with income and they have someone to take care of. Not really rocket science, but yet. And for most people, it is a period of time that is extremely short that they receive these benefits. Most recipients move into these programs temporarily and move right back out of them because it is just to assist them at a down point in their lives. It is not a character flaw. And if you or someone you know has received them, it is absolutely nothing that we should circle some shame around, right? But let's pretend that none of that gets to you. Let's pretend that you're like, you know what? Not my problem. And I don't want to pay for this. I don't want to be someone who has my tax dollars go to these children that are not mine. I've got my own problems. Well, it turns out there's an inconvenient truth here that SNAP actually doesn't take from the economy. That's right. I'm going to teach you a word. It's time for everybody's favorite math lesson. You guys love Political Fixer Live math lessons. We're going to learn about multipliers. All right, stay with me here, people. Stay with me here. All right. When you spend a dollar, not every dollar is spent the same. Not every dollar has the same impact, right? So, if you spend a dollar, if you give a dollar to someone who needs food, what do? They go buy something. Maybe it's something you agree with. Maybe it's not. Doesn't matter. They're buying it. They're not hoarding that cash. They don't have the cash to hoard, right? So they're spending it. So that money goes into the store. That store makes money. That store then uses that money to buy more goods from farmers, suppliers, whatever that they purchase there, and they also use it to pay their employees. And then their employees go spend more on the economy. So that dollar starts to multiply in its value. It actually grows our economy. And there are organizations that objectively study these multipliers. When we spend a dollar on something in taxes, what is the multiplier? What is the value that we get back from that dollar? So I'm going to give you a few of them. So, SNAP benefits. On average, if a dollar goes out of the treasury, then our economy receives about $1.50 to $1.80 for every dollar that we spend. It is a huge multiplier. It grows our economy to help people. It's one of the reasons that I feel like I'm going insane with some of these conversations. This idea of scarcity, that if we help people, we'll have less, is not just immoral, it's also incorrect. So if you find yourself having these conversations with friends or family members or colleagues, I'm hoping that this is helpful to you. This is data. This is data that when you actually help people, it helps all of us. It grows the entire economy at a rate of about $1.50 to $1.80 for every dollar spent. If you help someone who's unemployed be able to pay their rent and keep the lights on while they're unemployed, it's about $1.10 to $1.90, depending on the area and the rate of unemployment. You're investing in that community. Because think about it, if you don't and they're homeless, where are they going? Let's say they go to a homeless shelter. Someone's paying for that. They're now a liability on the books, not as a human being, but on the books, right? You help people, it helps all of us. It grows the economy. I was curious about Medicare and Medicaid. because we're talking about these healthcare expansions. And it turns out when people are able to pay for healthcare, not only do they miss fewer days of work and all of the good capitalist stuff, but also more hospitals stay open. That means more nurses and doctors get paid, more supplies like medical supplies get built. The whole thing grows. And for Medicaid expansion, it's between $1.35 and $2 is our multiplier. That's our word of the day. In general, if we were to increase these Affordable Care Act subsidies, the Obamacare money, it would be about $1.40 to $1.70, 40 to 70% increase on every one of those dollars spent. Now, there's an alternate case to be made here, which is corporate tax cut and tax cuts for billionaires. And if you're someone who loves that, if you're a billionaire watching to this program, first of all, please donate to your local food banks. We'll share more with you about why in just a bit. But if you are a billionaire, let me tell you, you're a drain on our economy. That's just the multiplier truth. Corporate tax cuts, for every dollar spent, it's about 20 to 40 cents that goes into the economy. With billionaires and high end tax cuts, it's 10 cents to 40 cents. Why? Because if you have money, what are you doing? If you've bought everything you need to buy, you're saving it. You're going to nest it away. You're going to invest it somewhere that doesn't benefit the greater good. It doesn't help grow the economy overall. Trickle down economics is a complete lie, right? People that need the money, they spend the money. It's an automatic boost of the economy right away. Whereas we're costing ourselves money every single time we have these high income tax cuts. Now, what's happening with SNAP now? And then I definitely want to get you guys' take on this stuff. Let me tell you what's happening right now. On November 1st, these benefits are set to expire. There are millions of people that they will go to use that card and it will not work. I don't know what the government's plan is to notify them, but if it's working as well as any other goddamn thing in this government, I can guess it's not going to be great. So the idea of someone going to buy food for their child and their card being declined is horrifying. And yet that is the vision I keep having times 41 million. Just unacceptable. There is a reserve in case things like this happen. People thought ahead and they're like, hey, if this happens where you guys are bickering about the government, could we not have children starving to death? Would that be cool? And someone's like, you know what? Not a bad idea. We're going to set up a fund for that. It's called a contingency reserve and it exists. And it's sitting right there with a pile of money with SNAP written like a giant cookie jar, just right there for this money to be used for children and families. Contingency fund in just such an occasion. And they're refusing to use it. You know, there's not a lot of people that I thought that I would dislike more than Mike Johnson, but Senator Thune is quickly raising up on my list in the worst possible way because even Josh Hawley, as in I run almost squealing like through the halls of justice during the insurrection, Josh Hawley, yeah, that dude, even he is like, hey guys, I think this is going too far. Should we maybe let the children eat? And Thune said, if they want the children to eat, then they can do what we want, open up the government and stop talking about healthcare subsidies. They're holding hungry children hostage. Okay, couple more, and then we're almost off this point because I can feel my blood pressure rising, and I want to hear what you guys think. This battle is not over. More than 24 states today filed a lawsuit because they want for the government to open up this contingency fund and continue the SNAP benefits. There are people fighting this. They are fighting hard for this. What can you, as a regular human, do? I'm going to give you some real practical advice, and then I want to hear from you. First of all, support your local food banks and pantries. You might not know where those are, and if so, how amazing that you've never had to rely on that, right? But I'm going to tell you a really easy way that you can find them. Feeding America has a website that has a locator. You just type in your zip code and it tells you all the food pantries that are near you that you can easily go to. And a lot of them tell you what they need. And so you can choose to go to one of those food pantries. And again, it is Feeding America. That is Feeding America. These food banks, on average, because they buy in bulk and because of the relationships they have with farms and other suppliers, for every $1 that you give to them, they are able to turn that into $9 worth of food on average. So you know that money is being well spent. They have a program to administer it quickly, and so if you want to help someone, that is a great investment of your time and your treasure. Feeding America. They are running low on supplies and many food pantries, and it's only going to get worse. There's another thing. You might see that people are doing like a canned food drive, especially as we get closer to Thanksgiving. Your kid's school might do it, or maybe your church or mosque or synagogue might be doing something like this. Here is an idea. Donate gift cards to your local grocery store instead if you can do it. Like a $10, $20 gift card. That goes a long way because then a family can discreetly buy what they need rather than sifting through canned goods and ending up with eight, things of cranberry gel. I love cranberry sauce, don't get me wrong, but that might not be what they need. So you could consider donating gift cards to local food and grocery shops rather than canned goods if there's a canned good drive in your area that you want to participate in. Another thing is that a lot of schools, churches, and other organizations are putting together some school lunch backpacks, so that kids can take extra food home. So there's a lot of school backpack programs where they just discreetly tuck the food in the different kids' backpack and they get to take it home, especially if there's siblings at home. So they can make sure they get fed. This is popular to do on Fridays and long weekends so that the family has stuff to eat on the weekends. And the other thing that you can do is just find out what is happening to organize in your community to help just people that you know might be in need. If you can discreetly not embarrass your neighbors, but just say, "Hey, I just want to check in. Are you doing okay?" And then quietly reach out to your friendship circle if they're not. So, this is a time definitely we want to look out for our own and for each other. And yeah, you can call Congress and say how upset you are that they're starving children, but honestly, if that's on the table right now, I don't know much that you could say to convince them. I can't give someone a soul. So, if you feel like that's constructive, I'm never going to say don't call Congress, but I feel like this is a moral low for us. I'll be honest. And I thought we couldn't get much lower, right? So I have some questions here. I want to ask you any other I just tried to do research and ask some people. I asked some teachers, I asked some people that get involved in these programs for some of these suggestions. I want to hear from you, right? Square Foot Gardening for You says impressed with World Central Kitchen. Yes, that is another great organization. I'm sure there are many. I just want to make sure that I found at least one reputable one to give you, but absolutely, that's great. Um, one of you is asking like, oh, school backpacks. Cynthia Fontaine, so good to see you, Cynthia, tonight. School backpacks. So different programs, particularly in the elementary and middle school programs, they work to identify kids in need. And I've seen this administered a lot of different ways. Some of it is like swapping the backpack for the kid. The idea behind it is very simple. The idea is to provide things to the kid as they're going home on the weekends without giving them something very identifiable where they have a stigma associated with them, where they, have a bright orange bag that says I'm poor on the front of it, right? Is essentially what they're trying to avoid. So they'll either figure it out and tuck it in the kid's backpack. Some of them swap it out. Some of them build extra backpacks and just hand them out. And if a kid wants to grab it, they can. I've seen it run a lot of different ways. You can reach out to your local school district and see if they're doing anything with a backpack program to help feed kids and their families in your area. Um, I see Kisra saying, yeah, this is a new low for America, right? Um, I do think people are going to step up and volunteer. I think that is true. I see Kelsey saying some of the states are going to fill in as they can. Absolutely. As usual, it's going to be the most vulnerable and the most vulnerable states that are going to hurt the most. I'm also seeing some infuriating footage of veterans that are now going without pay. And Tuesday, I believe, marks the first day, I think it's today, that TSA agents are missing another full paycheck. This is the first time they're missing a full paycheck. So you have people that did what they were told. They followed the Reagan blueprint. They have a respectable job or they are serving America or both. They did what they were told and we're still not paying them, and so they're finding themselves in a situation that some of them never thought they would be in. And that is that they can't keep the lights on and buy the prescriptions that the family members need and pay the note on the car and get the groceries and the things. Like, this is getting scary for a lot of people right now, and that's middle class folks, right? That's middle class folks that are missing a paycheck, and we've got millions of them. Then we've got millions of people on the border of poverty and below the poverty line that their lifeline is getting cut in front of us, right? So, you know, this is something that I do believe we can try to turn into a mission that we all work on together, which is to just keep our eyes out and see what we can do. Someone mentioned depression earlier, and I think it's important that we stop a second and have that conversation. There is a lot of heartache that's happening right now. And I don't know about you all, but I got like almost like kind of like a depressive dip when the stuff happened with the East Wing of the White House. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because it was symbolic, because some of this is vague and it's numbers. But then when you see it like really being ripped down, it feels real. Like, I don't know what it was, but it got to me. And so I say this like with all love that, like, do what you can, but don't lose yourself in all of this because it's so hard. Like, it's so hard. If you are a person who cares, and I know all of you do, you're joining me on this beautiful Tuesday night with some of your precious spare time because you care so much, right? Because you want things to be better. You want to understand what's going on. You want to find ways to help and to make positive change. You care. And so when you do care, then it gets to be a lot sometimes. And whatever your moment is, and we're all going to have them, you're not a bad person to also care for yourself, to walk away, to turn off the news, to set down the phone for a little while, to go do something that makes you happy. It is the only way that you can get up and fight that next day, right? And I think that all of us have had some moments, right? I think it'd be impossible not to. And part of the challenge of this program, we never have a shortage of things to talk about. There's never one time when I'm looking at a Tuesday afternoon, I'm like, yeah, not much happened. Right? I'm like, which thing am I going to talk about? That's the first thing. I try to always pick a story that I feel like you guys are already interested in, but I also try to pick something that I feel like we're not stopping as a family and really feeling the moment enough. And that's what this horrible snap conversation is. I hate bringing you bad news. I hate it. But like, we haven't been having this conversation properly. We really haven't. It's been distorted through decades of misinformation and racism and just awfulness, right? It's a lens that we're not going to be able to crack immediately. And I hope that that context made you realize that the root of food stamps, the root of welfare, it comes from patriotism. It comes from a pride that how dare we don't want any child anywhere to go hungry, but how dare we let it happen to one of ours? That used to be a point of pride, and how far we've strayed from that, right? So I think it's important to have that context, and then it's vitally critical that you all feel empowered. So some of it's big stuff. Voting is amazing. I hope if nothing else, we're not taking that for granted right now. So I'm not kidding. Vote, vote, vote in numbers wherever you are. I don't care if someone is running for mosquito catcher. If they are MAGA, that is a disease. This is not Republican versus Democrat. This is MAGA versus America. And you got to stomp out that disease. Whatever position, wherever you live, wherever you are in the country, find a way to vote in whatever race it is on Tuesday and find the MAGA candidate and vote against them. That's where we are. This is not a vote blue. This isn't go Dems. This is, I don't understand someone that rounds up children and starves other children. And I don't understand it, lets others get measles, like the whole thing, the whole thing. So there's an empowerment that I hope that you feel with voting. Don't take these elections for granted just because they're not shiny and sexy and celebrities aren't singing songs about us voting, right? Like, we got to take this one on. But then there's the small things that aren't small to someone else, right? I grew up in a town that was most people were below the poverty line. And my parents did not have a lot of money, but they had enough where we were fed. And when we got extra money, then they would look for ways to give it away. And someone might call that a poverty mindset. Like maybe if my parents had saved more of that money, they would have gotten into the middle class lifestyle sooner, which eventually happened when I was like a senior in high school. My dad got a better job, my mom got a better job with benefits, right? The whole thing. But for years growing up, there was like when we had extra money, we gave it away. That was what they did. And as an adult, I marvel at that, right? And one of the things I distinctly remember was that it was right before Halloween. It was this time of year, and my dad somehow got an extra like $100 for work. I don't He was a mechanic. It was very unsteady work, but he had a lot of jobs that week or something, and he got this extra $100. And so we went to the fabric store and we got this Halloween fabric. And then we went to whatever the dollar store was and got some candy. And my mom and her friends stayed up all night and they made these hand sewn cloth trick or treat bags for every kid in my grade so that every kid had one because he didn't want any of the kids to be too embarrassed to go trick or treating because they didn't have a pumpkin, right? I think we can go back to that. So, yeah. I see Cynthia saying sometimes we would have to walk 7 miles to my grandparents' house for food because we didn't have any. Punky is saying we are having a soup night. Oh, I love that, Punky, to help feed the community. I see Shirley joining us. It's so great, right? Jenny Doctor is saying this is doctor spelled Dokter. I feel like I should say, not doctor. Is there a doctor in the house? This is so important to save democracy. Um, Someone saying, can you share a link for the shirt? Absolutely. Let me give you the name of the shirt person. Again, she's amazing. Hold on. Oh, guys, I've got so much paper here, but her name is Miss Asia, but it's AJA on Blue Sky. You can definitely find her there. But I'm looking for the name of her shirt place. If you guys go see my latest TikTok, it's on there for sure. But I will find the name for. Oh, here it is. Coming and Going Designs. So if you go on Etsy, it's Coming and Going Designs, and she has some cute, cute stuff. So I got my Antifa shirt or Aunt Tifa, depending on where you're from, right? I see people saying they should have voted. Yeah, of course. People like, like this is, yeah, I get it. Like people threw a match on the fire. Some people threw kerosene on the fire, not knowing that it would get out of control. Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's ways we can work on that in the future. But these children didn't do it. These babies didn't ask to go hungry. So I think the problem exists and we got to fix it, right? So, yeah, so I love Cynthia saying going back to kinder times, maybe how to part of that we turn around, Dems back in power, keep your heads up. Yeah, love the shirt. Listen, I didn't design the shirt, but I love it as well, right? um, so, yes. So someone saying they haven't seen me posting in a while. Yes, that is true. I had a severe health issue, but I am fortunate enough to not home have just an amazing support network, but also have insurance that actually helped me cover it. And I had to travel out of state for care, and I'm doing much, much better. And that's how I'm able to spend more time and energy with all of you lovely peoples. So if you think that this was a good hour well spent, then I hope you will join us next week for our Political Fixer Live election special. And if you think that this was useful, I'm just now getting my sea legs under me from being ill. So you're definitely going to see a lot more good trouble stirred up in the near future, right? Um, Carrie, I am feeling much better. Thank you so much. We've gone through a lot, and we will definitely be talking about that once we get past election season. And there's actually a way that you all, big surprise, you're going to have homework. You all can pitch in and make sure that other women don't suffer the way that I did with this disease. So that's a project I'm going to bring to you all in a couple of months. I'm seeing a lot of people. Oh, it's hi, Leah. So good to see you. Some teachers will buy snacks to feed kids in their classroom. They'd like gift cards. That's a great idea. Just send. Listen, you don't know if the teacher's getting some assistance. These teachers are not paid well. Some of them are, and thankful to the schools that are able to do it. But yeah, sending a teacher some gift cards, love that. Absolutely. Right. Seeing a lot of love and positivity among all of you. Let's send just for a second before we end tonight. Our producer and chief of staff Sarah is not with us today because she's feeling under the weather. So definitely save some of those prayers or positive vibes or well wishes, depending on how you believe, for Sarah. She does so much to keep us all happy and to prepare for this show and to keep me in line for sure. So we definitely want to send some positivity to her. Let's end on a positive note. Listen, we're coming here as a community because we care. And so no matter what's happening out there, no matter what the news is saying or what you're watching, know that you're not alone. And if you have the audacity to dream for something bigger, if you are more of a sweeping broad let's make a change candidate in your heart of hearts, that's okay, because that's where we are too. We want to see things get better. We're going to do what we can to help the folks that are hurting right now, but we're all working together for better things. So when you have one of those down on your luck days, when you see one of those things that really gets to you, I hope you know that the Political Fixer Live is just one example of one tiny sliver of a fraction of a community. And you guys average over 10,000 people every week tune in to some portion of this program from around the world. And these are people that care. So you're absolutely not by yourself. I see that we hit 91,000 likes tonight, which is amazing. Sending love to Sarah. Awesome. Definitely will share these well wishes. I want to get this one thing here. That person, Leslie, says that people can call 211 for food banks. I did not know that. That's really great information, Leslie. Thank you so much. We'll start to do some more things to put together resources. Unfortunately, I think this is the beginning of what we're about to see, not the end. Maybe greater senses will prevail and they'll stave off this deadline. We're definitely keeping an eye on it. But just remember, there's a lot of people out there. We don't know their story. You're not alone with what you're thinking, but someone else might be feeling alone. So, whatever act of kindness you can do in the coming days and weeks, especially with the holidays and winter are ahead, I hope that you're able to just take a moment and realize that you matter and you can make a huge difference to someone who needs that little bit of sunshine. All right, everyone. I really hope that this has been a good use of your time. We covered a little bit of tough subject matter. It's getting harder every week, right? We're getting to some deep stuff, but hopefully, did you learn something? I learned something about SNAP. I didn't know why we called food stamps food stamps. I really didn't know the whole Clinton stuff. So that's kind of ick, right? Lots of things that we're learning together. And we learned to where this shirt was made, which is coming and going designs. So definitely send me your story ideas. We're going to keep posting some content and keep raising some consciousness and getting some good stuff going. Take care of yourselves and each other. On behalf of myself and the Political Fixer team and our friends and family and Sarah, who's is under the weather and I think watching from home at some point, then I want to wish you all a safe and amazing week. And I'll see you for the election night special next Tuesday. Bye, everyone. See you all soon.